The Last Bridge, Part 1, The Night of the Flood. The river remembered every slight. Every dock that leaked oil, every lawn cut too close to the bank, every stone pulled loose and pocketed. When the rains came, it came with a long memory. By nightfall, Miller's Lane was already a canal. In the little blue house at the end of the street, Marisol Vega folded towels into a basket as though order could hold back the water. Her grandson Gabriel, only 16, hauled sandbags to the porch, his young arms straining against burlap soaked and heavy. He insisted they should leave. The sirens were warning it. The radio repeated it. But Marisol only shook her head. "We will," she told him, "when the rain shows us the way." The house creaked like a ship at harbour. Nails pinged as boards shifted. In the kitchen, water lapped against the cabinets, rising with steady patience. Gabriel's fear sharpened into pleading. "We'll drown if we stay," he said. But Marisol steadied him with the calm of someone who had endured storms before. "Then we walk," she answered. "The bridge is still there." The railway bridge, condemned for years, rusting into memory, was their only chance. The town's main roads had already drowned, and the newer bridges were swallowed under torrents. The railway line, though frail, still stood above the floodplain. It was a dangerous hope, but it was the only one left. Through the windows, the storm roared like artillery. A propane tank slammed against the porch with a boom that shook the timbers. Furniture floated, picture frames shifted, and still Marisol carried her keepsakes to higher shelves. She marked their names on their forearms with laundry marker ink, her own and Gabriel's, because she believed in being found, no matter what the river took. At 2 a.m, the river gave its answer. It struck the porch with the weight of a battering ram. Sandbags shuddered, then buckled. Cold water surged into the hall. There was no time for further arguments. They pulled on boots, packed a flashlight wrapped in plastic, a thermos of coffee, and 2 apples. The door opened onto a wall of water. It rushed around their legs and stole their breath. They stepped into the current anyway. Miller's Lane was gone, replaced by a black channel where mailboxes tilted like drunks and stop signs blinked uselessly under the surface. A yellow school bus light still pulsed silently in the distance, as though it could signal rescue to the moon. They kept moving, each step a small miracle. They followed the power lines overhead, as if they were prayer beads strung across the night. Voices echoed strangely through the storm, neighbors calling, or perhaps only the storm throwing words back. Gabriel wanted to answer, but Marisol pressed on. "We are someone," as she told him, "and we must keep going." By 3:30, the water shallowed at last. Their boots found purchase on the hill that rose to the tracks. Every breath hurt, but they climbed. And at the crest of the hill, they saw it. The railway bridge, black iron against grey storm clouds, stretched across the boiling river. Its ribs sang with the wind, a long, uneasy note. Gabriel stopped and stared at its silhouette. It looked too thin, too rusted, too broken to hold. And yet, it was the only way forward. Part 2, The Crossing. The railway bridge rose out of the mist like the skeleton of some long-dead giant. Its black iron ribs groaned in the storm wind, its bolts streaked orange with rust. Below, the river seethed, swollen past its banks, dragging trees, barrels, even the remains of whole porches downstream. For years, children in the town had dared each other to walk this bridge. By day, it was a game. By night, it was a test of courage. Now, in the flood, it was no game. It was the only way across. Gabriel's chest heaved with fear. He saw the gaps in the boards, the slick sheen of rain across iron rails. "It's not safe," he whispered. But Marisol laid her hand on his shoulder and steadied him. She told him that strength was not the absence of fear, it was the decision to move anyway. And so, they began. The first steps were cautious. Every plank moaned beneath their weight. The bridge swayed like a boat against the current. Rust flaked from the railings, staining their hands. The air itself seemed to resist them, heavy with rain and river spray. Step by step, they advanced. The town fell away behind them, swallowed in fog. Ahead stretched nothing but steel and water. Beneath, the river roared, white-toothed, hungry. Halfway across, the way forward vanished. A section of the walkway had collapsed, 10 feet of nothing but air and raging river below. The gap yawned like a mouth, daring them to try. Gabriel froze. His legs locked. He said he couldn't do it. The water was too far down, the jump too long. But Marisol leaned close, her face lined with years of storms and survival. She reminded him of every step he had already taken, of the weight he carried, not only for himself, but for her, for their family, for the future that waited beyond the flood. She told him that resilience lived in the moments when there was no easy way forward. That sometimes the only path was to leap. And Gabriel leapt. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but air and rain. His boots scraped iron. His hands slammed against the rail. Pain tore his palms open, but he held. He pulled himself up with a cry that was half terror, half triumph. Marisol followed. She did not leap like a boy. She crossed like a woman who had carried burdens all her life. Slow, deliberate, one hand, one foot, and then the next. Where the walkway ended, she swung her weight onto the twisted frame and moved with patience, inch by inch, until her boots found solid planks again. Behind them, the bridge groaned. Another section tore free, crashing into the river and vanishing in foam. But ahead, the far bank was waiting, solid earth, lanterns burning faintly through the mist. People. Safety. The bridge was breaking beneath them, but it carried them just far enough. And when they stepped onto the far bank, Marisol whispered, more to herself than to anyone listening. Even broken things can carry us, if we trust them. Part 3. The Other Side and the Weeks After. When their boots struck earth again, it did not feel like earth. It felt like miracle. The far bank was solid, but slick with mud. Lanterns glowed through the mist, held by neighbors who had fled earlier, their shapes wavering in the rain. Hands reached out, pulling Gabriel up, steadying Marisol's arms. They stumbled onto the hillside and collapsed together in the grass, half laughing, half crying, their breaths torn ragged from effort and fear. Behind them, the bridge shuddered. One of its iron ribs buckled with a scream like tearing metal. A whole section gave way, disappearing into the foam below. The bridge had carried them, but only just. Marisol closed her eyes and whispered, it did its duty. The ruined town. At dawn, when the rain eased to drizzle, the town was unrecognizable. Streets had become rivers. Houses leaned at crooked angles or lay split open, their contents scattered like children's toys. Trees uprooted, boats jammed into porches, power lines sagging like wet rope. But the people, those who had made it through the night, stood together. Some with nothing but the clothes on their backs, some with mud-streaked faces and trembling hands. They gathered in the school gymnasium, which stood on higher ground, its floor crowded with cots and blankets. Gabriel could not sit still. His hands, raw from rust and rope, needed work. He joined the volunteers, hauling timber, stacking crates, ferrying supplies from one side of the room to the other. He lifted more than he thought he could. Every trip, He carried the weight of survival like a promise. Marisol found her place as well. In the school kitchen, she lit stoves, boiled water, cooked pot after pot of soup. She fed neighbors with the patience of someone who knew the power of bread, broth, and a steady hand. Vignettes of resilience. The days blurred into each other. Yet in the blur, there were moments worth keeping. A family reunited when the last missing child was brought in by rescue crews. The mother wept until her son wriggled free of her arms and laughed, the sound cutting through grief like a blade of sunlight. A farmer, his fields drowned, sat quietly in a corner shelling beans he had saved in a tin can. For next season, he said simply. Children splashed in puddles in the ruined streets, laughing in a way only children can, reminding everyone that life was louder than loss. The conversation. One evening, after hauling timber all day, Gabriel sat beside Marisol outside the school. The sun set in bruised colors over the broken horizon. His voice was low, thoughtful. "Why did you make me cross?" he asked. Marisol watched the light fading. "Because even broken bridges can carry us, if we trust them. And because one day you will build new ones." The lesson. In the weeks after, Gabriel did not forget. He worked until his body ached. He learned to repair walls, to lay beams, to lift with more than just muscle, with resolve. He grew into someone who could stand where others faltered. And each night, when he closed his eyes, he remembered the bridge. The iron ribs. The missing planks. The roar of the river below. And the voice of his grandmother, steady even when the world tilted. It was then he understood, resilience was not the luxury of being untouched. It was the practice of moving forward, plank by plank, step by step, across spans that might collapse but somehow hold long enough to carry you through. Part 4. Epilogue. Years later. Time has a way of smoothing scars into stories. The town along the river rebuilt, though it never forgot the night the water came. Houses were raised on stronger foundations. Roads were carved higher into the hills. Children grew into adults who carried warnings in their blood, lessons in their bones. Gabriel grew too. He studied hard, worked harder, and in time, he became an engineer. Not of machines, but of spans, bridges that tethered one shore to another, steel arcs that carried people safely across the same river that once had tried to take him. The boy who once froze at a gap in the planks now ran his hands along blueprints, measuring not only weight and stress, but courage and care. Every line he drew was shaped by memory. Dedication Day. On the morning of the dedication of his first major project, Gabriel stood on the riverbank once more. Before him rose a new bridge, wide, strong, steady as the horizon itself. Its girders gleamed silver in the sunlight. Its foundations were driven deep into the earth. It was built not to tremble at the first flood, but to endure. Crowds gathered, waiting for speeches. The mayor held a ribbon. Children clutched little flags. Marisol, older now and leaning on a cane, sat in the front row, her eyes proud and wet. Gabriel stepped to the microphone. His words were simple. He spoke of resilience, of the night he crossed the condemned railway bridge with his grandmother, and of the lesson he carried ever since. He told them, resilience isn't being unbroken. It's crossing anyway, plank by plank, even when the river roars. Bridges are not built to be perfect. They are built to carry us, even in the storm. Then he cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. And the first people walked across a bridge that would outlast them. Closing image. As the sun set that evening, Gabriel lingered at the railing. He looked down into the water, karma now, but never tamed. For a moment, He thought he saw the shadow of the old railway bridge, its rusted bones still buried in the current. He laid his hand on the new steel rail, warm from the day's light, and whispered a quiet promise to the river and to himself. The flood may come again, but we will cross. Always, we will cross. And with that, Gabriel walked forward, over the bridge he had built, carrying strength born from struggle, carrying resilience turned to strength.